Hey, it's Andrew here at BTORange in Conroe, Texas, and today back to the Remingtons, a rifle model that I have a little personal history with. This is the Remington model 788, U.S.-made gun from the late 60s. The design began in 1964. The designer or the engineer at Remington by the name of Wayne Leake, L-E-E-K. They started development of this rifle in '64 as a lower cost alternative to the 700. And we've talked about it in numerous videos with numerous manufacturers. The late 60s, mid to late 60s, were a time when everybody was trying to reduce production costs and reduce manufacturing costs in an effort to keep the retail pricing to the consumer lower than the flagship lines were. The Remington 700 had been introduced not long before. It had been introduced in '63 it was introduced as an extension of the 721 line. But and then the Model 70 was out there, and Remington wanted a lower cost alternative to those rifles to put in their line. So Wayne Leake and his team developed the 788. And the only thing, there's no similarity with this gun to the Model 700. The only commonality of parts would be like the ejector and the extractor, but that's it. So there was no economy of scale. There was no ability to utilize Remington 700 production line for the manufacture of the 788. So it stayed in production. It entered commercial production in 1967 and went away in 1983 is when the gun went out of production. And at that time, the cost of producing this rifle was only marginally less than the Remington 700, but without the margin because they couldn't sell it at the same price as they did the 700. So it was just a budgetary issue that caused the rifle to be discontinued. So the design is somewhat different. There are some features that are extremely different from the Remington 700 line, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But let's just take a look at the overall rifle. Let's clear it out real quick. So on these guns, you notice the locking lugs in the rear. To remove the bolt on a Remington 788, you pull, this is the safety right here, that pushes forward. Well, I say, ha-ha. And the bolt should come out. Clear this magazine out. There it goes. Just didn't have the safety push far enough forward, so you have to push it all the way forward, and then the magazine comes out. So let's talk about this bolt a little bit. One of the big design differences between this and the 700 is the way the locking lugs are configured. On the 788, there are 9 locking lugs, and they're here at the rear of the bolt. Instead of the 700 has the 2 opposing locking lugs at the front of the bolt. This has 9 smaller locking lugs than the 700, but if you add up all the square inches of the locking surface, there's actually more locking surface on the bolt on the 788 than there is a 700. So the action is plenty strong. With those 9 lugs, we have a 68-degree bolt throw as opposed to the 90-degree bolt throw of an opposing lug system like the Remington 700. Now, full disclosure, when I was a young person, I don't remember how old I was, 13, 14 years old, I wanted a deer rifle of my own. And I had been for some time, back in those days, there was a periodical that came out every year called the Shooter's Bible. It was a big, thick book. I don't remember if it was a Gun Digest product or who produced it, but it was the Shooter's Bible. And it had the catalog basically of all the major and not so major manufacturers available for that year. It came out once a year. And instead of reading, I don't know, the Hardy Boys or any of those other books, I would read that Gun Digest, and I would pretty much memorize the Gun Digest. And it was just a terrible thing, or the Shooter's Bible. And I'm thinking I'm going to try to find on the secondary market. I'm going to start trying to find some of those back issues, because it's just a huge wealth of information on this older stuff. But at that time, it was the end production stuff, and I had researched a rifle. I knew my dad wasn't going to buy me a Remington 700 or a Winchester 70, but I was able to put together, and I remember writing it down. Kind of a breakdown of why this rifle was the best bang for the buck and why this would be a great deer rifle for me. And I got it in 243. We went through the locking bolts. We went through the strength of the action. We went through the lock time of the action. We went through all of that. I had it all spelled out. And I remember my dad laughing. He said, okay, so we went and got a Remington 788 and 243. Wonderful little rifle. So the 9 locking lugs to the rear of the action, the extractor in the front and the ejector in the front are the same as the Remington 700, and that's where the similarity ends. We have a detachable metal magazine here, and in the small calibers that this gun was chambered in, 222 and 223, it held one additional round. I believe that's a 4+1, and then in everything else it was 3+1. So when the gun was introduced, and this is kind of odd, when the gun was introduced in 67, the calibers available for this gun were 222 Remington, and then 22 250, and of all things, 30-30 Winchester and 44 Magnum. When this gun was introduced, the MSRP was about $10 less than the Winchester 94 lever action, and there was kind of a poke in the eye from Remington to Winchester that they chambered this gun in 30-30. Now, from an engineering standpoint, those locking lugs in the rear of the bolt means there are no locking lug recesses in the front of this receiver ring. So feeding that rimmed cartridge for the 30-30 and the 44 Magnum up from the magazine into the receiver, there's no recesses where the bolt lugs would normally go. There's no recesses there to hang it up. So the action was kind of uniquely suited to those rimmed rounds, and it worked well on those calibers. So 30-30 and 44 Magnum for a few years. They only chambered those for a few years through about 1970 in 30-30 and 44 Magnum. Notice that the ones that you would fully expect it to be chambered in were not. It wasn't initially chambered in 243, was not initially chambered in 308. They came soon enough. The 243 came up in 68, and the 308 came up in 69. This particular gun is 1972. In fact, it is, what did we figure out? August 1972, and we'll get to how we figured that out in a minute. But some more variations. This gun came out over the years. They ended up chambering the gun in 6mm Remington, 1969. And then we see a left-handed gun come out. They chambered the gun in left-handed configuration in 6mm Remington and 308, and that was the bolt handle was on the left side. The ejection port was always on the right side. So it wasn't. I guess it wasn't a true left-handed rifle. And then along about 1980, for the last couple of years of production, we saw the 243 and 308 available in an 18.5-inch carbine variation. Had a straight comb stock instead of Monte Carlo stock. And again, then the gun went away in 1983. So those variations are out there, and some are more valuable. The others we'll talk about. But let's look at some of the things to think about when you're looking at this gun. We talked about where the bolt lugs are. So one of the things you hear about on a 788 is called bolt flex, or what happens when you shoot the gun. And this is fairly particular to the 308 and possibly the 243, which are the two most common calibers you'll find in this rifle, not so much the other stuff. Almost never 222 and 223. So what happens when the gun is fired at the instant of firing with the pressure, you have a little bit of stretch of the receiver, have a little bit of flex in that bolt. So you get a little bit more opportunity for the case to stretch, more room for the case to stretch upon firing. So it works that brass more than, say, a Remington 700 or a Winchester 70 does. It locks in the front. So we don't, it's nothing to worry about, especially if you are shooting just standard pressure factory loads. Now, this is not a gun that I would suggest reloaders try to exceed factory specifications with. The action is plenty strong. That's not the problem. The problem is that you're going to be running through brass a lot faster than you would with say a Winchester 70 or a Remington 700. So that bolt flex is an issue. Look at those, as far as bolt lug setback on those smaller bolts, I've seen it happen, but I've also seen it happen on 700s and the two bolt lug actions as well. So it doesn't hurt, especially in 308, if you just run a no-go chamber gauge on the gun. If you have the ability to do that before you buy it, to make sure we don't have bolt setback to where it's caused excessive headspace. So that would be a thing to check. So the stocks on these guns for the first 2 years were walnut. Then after that, and again in an attempt to keep the manufacturing and production costs low, they switched to beech and sometimes elm with the walnut stain. This is not walnut. It's just a hardwood stock with the walnut finish on it. So that said, it doesn't affect the shootability of the gun, but it's not walnut. They were never checkered. There were never checkered pattern stocks on a 788. So they didn't come with pads. They came just with black plastic butt plates. They were not chambered in magnum calibers. If you notice, they were all short action calibers. 7mm 08 was another chambering that came along in the 788 later on in production as well. But they're all short action calibers. There's no long action, no 30-06, no 270, and certainly no 7 mag or any of that. Now, do you find these guns out and about? Sure, over 500,000 of these guns were produced during the production run. That's a sizable amount for what, 16 years, 500,000 guns. So not too bad. A lot of people, myself included, really liked the gun. The trigger isn't that great. It's a non-adjustable trigger, and it just kind of is what it is. There's some zinc castings in there. And you either get a good one or you get a fair one. That's about what it is. The aftermarket triggers were available for 788. Timney produced them. They're still available from, in some places you can put an aftermarket trigger in a 788 should you choose to. And the same with the stock. If you just can't stand the uncheckered stock, companies like Boyd's make laminate stocks of various configurations. And at one time, Ramline made a really cheap injection molded black synthetic stock for it. But if you don't like the hardwood stock, I can't imagine anyone would like that plastic hollow Ramline stock, just saying. Barrel lengths were 22 inches, except for 222 and 22-250, which were 24 inches. They all had open sights. So that's the general synopsis of the 788. So what are we looking for? We talked about the bolt. We talked about the potential issues. Now, guns made prior to 1975, such as this gun, with the safety on, the bolt is locked closed. After 75, they modified the safety lever so that it did not lock the bolt. And that's a relatively simple modification for a gunsmith to take care of for you. If you want that on an earlier rifle, it's fairly easy to make that happen to where you can unload the chamber with the safety on. The safety does positively block the trigger, and it's probably a good modification to do. So that said, the other stuff to look at is the overall condition of the bore, the same stuff you would always look at. So we always talk about originality, scarcity, and condition, right? So originality, look for those aftermarket pads. They never came with a pad. This particular rifle, this rifle that you see on the bench, this is not, it's a Remington Mark butt plate, but it's not fit well. It would have never come from Remington like this. So at some point, this is a different butt plate. This is a Remington 700 butt plate or some other butt plate that's been put on there, and we're going to refit that in the shop to make it look better. It's got a very noticeable edge right here that just irritates me looking at it. So we're definitely going to fix that. This particular scope's just a nondescript scope. It might as well say scope in white letters on it. I think it's an old Tasco or maybe old Bushnell product, but it just is what it is in these cheapy Tasco rings. But 500,000 of them were made. They're not particularly scarce. They're out there. Now, having said that, some calibers are more scarce than others, and therefore the money goes up, right? So originality, scarcity, condition. So condition, this particular rifle, that's the only thing I really don't like about it. Everything else is okay. It's missing the rear sight because the scope's mounted on it. That's fairly common. The magazines are getting to be a bit problematic to find. So, and especially the oddball caliber magazines, the 30-30 and the 44 Magnum magazines. So make sure the gun comes with the correct magazine and that it has a magazine with it if you're going to buy it. They can be sourced, but be prepared for some sticker shock, particularly in the calibers where they only fit the one magazine, right? So the 243, 308, 708 feed out of the same mag. 30-30 is its own thing. 44 Magnum is its own thing. 22-250 is its own thing. So I don't know if 6mm will feed out of that mag or not. We'd have to see. But what would you expect to pay for a 788 in nice condition, good condition? In the normal calibers that you would find in a bolt action, that's the 243s, the 308 for sure, 708, even the 6mm. You can generally find these at $500 or a little less. It's unusual to find them for going for more than $500. People can ask it all day long, but it's unusual that they would get it. Now, when we get to the lower production calibers, when we get into or configurations, when we get into the left-hand guns, you see the left-hand guns bring between $500 and $600 in that production. The carbines, because of the limited production, are bringing a little bit more than $500 typically. But the real money in this gun is in the 30-30 and the 44 Magnum, just from earlier gun, probably a walnut stock gun, and low production. So the 30-30s, and I looked today on an auction site looking at closed auctions, and I see them actually closing the $900 mark in 30-30, and the 44 Magnum bringing over $1,000 in this particular rifle. So that's where the money's at. Should you find one floating around the pawn shop or the used gun rack at your gun store that you visit, that 44 Magnum is where the money is. So that said, if you need a super, it's a reliable deer rifle. It's a great deer rifle. It's one that you shouldn't worry about taking out in the field and getting beat up, getting in and out of the deer stand or whatever. And it's accurate enough. I mean, they're actually fairly accurate rifles if you get one with a good trigger in it. With good glass on it, a minute to a minute and a half MOA is very realistic for these rifles. I shot my 243 a lot growing up, and of course that's when I had good eyeballs I could see, and it was accurate enough. It could outshoot me for sure. And we still shoot them in for people at the range when they bring in a 788, and they do a nice job. So I wouldn't shy away from a 788 at all. It's a bit vintage. It's not all tacky cool and flashy, and it's not all super synthetic, I don't know, whatever, no carbon fiber barrels or any of that business. But it's just a good, solid, reliable bolt-action gun. Just pay attention to the magazine. Make sure you don't lose that dude. If you're 308, just double check your headspace on it. It shouldn't be an issue. It's very, very, I think I can count on one hand the number of rifles that I've actually physically handled that have had any kind of significant bolt lug setback in this model. So it's a Remington 788. Another great rifle from Remington from the 60s and 70s. Oh, I was going to tell you how we dated them. We dated just like we do any of the other ones. The serial number isn't really the key to the Remington pattern guns, particularly the rifles. On this left side of this barrel, let me turn this around. On the left side of this barrel, right forward of the receiver ring, right in here, there's a series of letters. And on this particular one, it's WW. And there's a chart. The first letter is going to be the month, and the second letter is going to be the year of production. So it's to decode, and this is available from Remington Society of America. It's probably in other places. I'm a member of the Remington Society of America. If you like these old Remington products, I suggest that you take a look at them. It's not expensive to join it, and you get a wonderful quarterly magazine, basically, with all kind of neat articles. It's a good thing to do if you like Remington product. But that first letter, if you took the word black powder and then X for December, so B starting in January, black powder, and then X for December, that'll give you the month. And then the second letter, there is a chart for the years. Now the letters repeat, so you have to kind of know when the production date of your gun is, right? So this particular gun will be 1972. The other options would be like 1998 when this gun was out of production, so that's not it, or somewhere around 1946, and obviously that's not it either. So it takes a little bit of logic and a little bit of knowing when the gun was produced to figure out that. So assuming the barrel hasn't been changed on 788, that's probably unlikely, then we can be pretty assured that this is a 1960, what did I say it was? 1972 gun. So anyway, Remington 788, we've been asked for this gun. We finally got one to do a video on, so here we go. If you like what we're doing, hit that subscribe button. Let us know. We appreciate your continued patronage of the channel. Leave us a comment. We respond to those as we can. And hit that like button and hit that little bell button to let you know when we post a new video. We try to push them out once a week anyway. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.